Greetings, everyone. My name is Afraim Katzir, and on behalf of Sephardic Heritage International in DC, or SHIN-DC, welcome. Welcome to today's pre-Passover celebration of Female Voices of Freedom in honor of International Women's Day and Women's History Month. Sephardic Heritage International and the NAACP celebrate this occasion with a coalition of partners and allies for justice and equality listed on today's program. Today, we are also honoring some of the female voices of freedom in our communities. Inspired by Maud Nathan, a Sephardic Jewish female voice for justice and equality, this program recognizes women whose struggles for social justice and freedom have made a positive impact in our lives and launches an initiative aimed at working together on issues that relate to women and our diverse communities. Today, we hope to learn more about those issues and how we can begin to address them. Maud Nathan was a social activist and a strong advocate of women's rights. She was a leader in the women's suffrage movement, as was her husband, and she became an international figure in the women's rights movement. Maud Nathan spoke out against rising group hatred, bigotry, anti-Semitism, and racial prejudice in her 1933 autobiography, writing, "Prejudice produces humiliation, which is not easy to bear. And the sad part is that the nature becomes warped and the spirit of kindliness and friendliness is changed into bitterness and resentment. To live in peace, there must be mutual confidence, trust, cooperation, no antagonism." That's why we're here today, to build that mutual confidence, trust, and cooperation by looking at the experiences of women in our diverse communities. Today's themes include female voices, diversity, struggles for justice, equality, and freedom, and issues on which we can work together to better the lives of women and our diverse communities. One of our partners is the Embassy of Israel in Washington, DC. And one of the inspiring women in our community is Tammy Ben-Haim, Minister for Public Diplomacy at the Embassy of Israel in Washington, DC. Tammy will now share a poem to help kick off today's gathering.
Thank you so much, Afraim, for doing all this. It's very exciting to be here today and join you, as well, of course, as our other partners, the NAACP, the RAC, ADL, Hadassah, and so many more. When thinking about the theme of the event, when Afraim told me about it, I was reminded of a beautiful piece by the Israeli poet Rachel. The poem is called "Rak al atzmi lesaper yadati." Only about myself can I talk or tell. I'll read it. "Rak al atzmi lesaper yadati. צר עולמי כעולם נמלה, גם מסעי עמסתי כמוה, רב וכבד מכתפי הדלה." Only of myself I know how to tell. My world is as narrow as an ant's. Like an ant too, my burden I carry, too great and heavy for my frail shoulders. My way too, like the ants to the treetop, is a way of pain and toil. A gigantic hand, assured and malicious, a mocking hand lies over all. All my paths are made bleak and tearful by the constant dread of this giant hand. Why do you call to me, wondrous shores? Why do you toy with me, distant lights? I don't think Rachel makes herself small by comparing herself to an ant. She is focusing on the individual story, on her personal story. The more we talk and tell our personal stories, the more universal they become, the more people we can touch with them. And we learn that our burdens can be shared, that there are other shoulders to help us carry the load, to share with us and stand with us. I'm looking forward to hearing the stories from these four impressive women here, as I'm sure all of you are as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, for continuing to inspire us not only with the insightful poem, but also with your accomplishments in the field of diplomacy. I now turn the program over to our moderator, Rachel Wahba. Rachel is a psychotherapist and co-founder of a lesbian travel company called Olivia Travel. She is also a blogger for Times of Israel and is an activist who teaches that Jews are a multicultural people. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Afraim. I love that you're doing this, and I really like the fact that it's right before Passover, which we'll be celebrating in a couple of weeks, commemorating the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and their transition from slavery to freedom. March is also Women's History Month, commemorating and encouraging the study, observance, and celebration of the vital role of women in history. And we're going to hear from some amazing women today. Our program frames our diverse journeys as women from the perspective of 3 questions asked at the Levantine Passover Seder: where we come from, where we are going, and what provisions, what do we need to get there? A little bit about my personal history. I come from cultures that have severely suppressed women's voices. I am an Iraqi Egyptian Jew. I was born in India, and I grew up stateless, i.e. powerless, in the 50s and 60s in post-war Japan. I found freedom when I left Japan for college in the United States on Red Cross papers, a student visa, in 1964. In that era, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and gay liberation freed many of us in different ways. My interest in psychotherapy also freed me personally and professionally, and I worked in several community mental health clinics in San Francisco with gay men and lesbians working their way out of closets where the doors were still not quite open. Around that time, 35 years ago, I co-founded Olivia Travel, a company created to be a safe space for out lesbian and queer women to travel the world and change hearts and minds. We had at first thought it was just going to be a travel company where women could hold hands in public and so on. What we found was we became engaged in the communities we visited, and we did change hearts and minds all over the world. And to date, we've taken 350,000 women with us. Diversity has always been about raising consciousness. I could never have realized my potential to the extent that I have as a woman, and also a lesbian, a Mizrahi Jew, a feminist, and a Zionist without support and allies. Today's panel gives us the opportunity to raise consciousness about the experiences of diverse women with the hope of being able to build allyship and work together on issues that affect us and our various communities. Our program today honors 4 women, and they are impressive. Dr. SHARON NAZARIAN, Sharon EUBANKS, ASHAGER ARARO, and Dr. TARECE JOHNSON. We will be referencing the traditional Passover Seder, which profiles 4 kinds of sons. And this event honors 4 wise daughters. We ask each of our 4 wise daughters from the perspective of progress for women and our communities. 1, where are we coming from? Where are we going? And what do we need? What are the provisions we need to get there? We'll begin with our first honoree, Dr. SHARON NAZARIAN. Sharon is a Senior Vice President of International Affairs at the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. She is a Jew, Iranian-born American social activist, academic, and philanthropist who bears the responsibility of fighting anti-Semitism and racial hatred around the globe, including overseeing ADL's Israel office. Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I come from the land of Cyrus the Great, the first world leader to articulate a declaration of human rights, as evidenced by the 6th century BC Cyrus cylinder, a cylinder with etchings that refer to Cyrus uniting his empire by restoring religious sanctuaries of all faiths and repatriating deported people to their homeland. The heritage of Cyrus was the heritage of human understanding, tolerance, courage, compassion, and above all, human liberty. I come from 2,700 years of Jewish heritage in modern-day Iran. I'm neither Ashkenazi nor Sephardic. I'm Persian. And my ancient people have been credited with assuring the survival of the richness of Persian culture while fighting centuries of persecution and intolerance. I come from a Jewish family who was first forced into exile by a revolution that was meant to bring democracy to my homeland, but was hijacked by zealots and extremists imposing discrimination and intolerance to all those who were the other. We left our homeland knowing we could never return. I come from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, where my family and I were embraced, nurtured, and flourished through education, economic opportunities, and the reestablishment of our community. I come from the richness of Iranian and American culture. Where am I going? I'm building a world that aspires to be free of hate. I'm fighting to protect Jewish communities and other vulnerable people around the world from anti-Semitism, extremism, and bigotry. I'm sounding the alarms of growing movements of white supremacy and ultranationalism, the interconnectedness of these movements between the US and Europe, and that such threats are global, and that they impact our national security. I'm building bridges in the Middle East between Jews and Arabs, investing in societies of peace and resilience against hatred and extremism. I am building understanding in Latin America about the prevalence of bias, othering, and the connection between economic insecurity and anxiety, and growing intolerance, scapegoatism, and conspiracy theories. What provisions do I need to get there? I need greater empathy for the other. I need courage to speak out inside of hatred. I need coalitions working together to fight extremism. I need communities to look inward and call out intolerance in their own families. I need communities who will welcome the stranger. I need leaders who will lead, who will call out extremism, even if it lessens their chances of winning political power. I want to thank the Sephardic Heritage International DC and NAACP for this great honor. I'm inspired by my co-honorees for their work, their passion, and their commitment. Thank you all for shining a light on women who are committed to the pursuit of freedom and justice. Thank you.
Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I just have a million questions to ask you. Wish you could go on for another, 3 hours. We're going to now turn to our honoree, Sharon Y. EUBANKS. Sharon is an attorney who was lead counsel at the Department of Justice on behalf of the United States in the historic federal tobacco litigation. Co-author of Bad Acts, the racketeering case against the tobacco industry. She was also on the trial team that secured the largest employment verdict in a gender discrimination case in the US history. 2 years ago, Sharon was a keynote speaker for the West Virginia annual meeting of the NAACP. She currently serves as chief counsel at the National Whistleblower Center, a nonprofit that educates, empowers, and represents whistleblowers worldwide. Go, Sharon.
Thank you. I'm honored to be featured as a wise daughter and to share the screen with these amazing and phenomenal women. So thank you, Franz, and the Sephardic Heritage International DC, and thank you, NAACP, for bringing together all of us for this program. I looked at the 3 questions and thought about it a lot, because I'm Christian, but my husband is Jewish, and I've been to many a Seder. The 3 questions, which my children were all familiar with, did come to mind, and our times together was something that I reflected on. As to the first question, I'll get to it. Where am I coming from? Well, a loving family, thank God, because I was born in 1955 and grew up in Mississippi. I lived there until 1977. Mississippi was a state where freedom and equality was for a select few, certainly not to anyone who wasn't white. I was taught by my activist parents that I was equal to anyone and everyone, and that I must stand up for myself as well as others who could not. That is why I became a lawyer. Second, where am I going? Well, I'm going to the fight for freedom and equality for all, not just a select few. Equality and social justice can be achieved through the law. And as Martin Luther King famously said, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Third, what are the provisions that I need to get there? Well, that's really simple. I need people. I need all of you. I need all of you to advocate. The struggle for equality and social justice really is for all communities of people, not just for a few select people. For women, LGBTQ, disabled, prisoners, poor people, everybody literally needs to be a part of this struggle. Equality is what binds us as a group, a common goal for all of us, and something that should not be doled out to just a few. Thank you.
I was so busy clapping, I forgot we have more people. Thank you so much. Our next honoree is ASHAGER ARARO, who I know personally and adore her. ASHAGER was born en route to Israel during Operation Solomon. She is the founder of Batei, an Ethiopian Heritage Center in Tel Aviv, through which she challenges stereotypes and breaks down barriers through education. ASHAGER connects diverse visitors to Ethiopian culture through food, dance, and art. ASHAGER, let's hear your voice.
Hey everyone, first of all, I'm very, very happy to be able to be here, and just with all the internet connection problem, but far away from Israel, you have a voice here that appreciates what you're doing and your support and your love, and especially in this amazing week of Women's Day. I just want to take a moment, first of all, to thank the amazing women that built the path in order for me to be where I am today. Today, I'm a small business owner that are able to tell their story, the story of Ethiopian Jews from Ethiopia by the people, for the people. And that would never happen without the amazing work that my mom, my grandma, and so many generations before us have done for me to be in that moment. And I was born in Ethiopia, and one of the most amazing Jewish communities we have out there. The Jewish community is very, very diverse. And I think like one of the most unique one is the Ethiopian Jews. I'm not biased in any way, don't worry. I checked that, Ethiopian Jews are up there, not biased, promise you. And the reason that is so unique, but when you look about it, the Ethiopian Jewish communities out there worldwide, you hear that Yemen Jews knew about Moroccan Jews that knew about Jews from Europe. But Ethiopian Jews didn't know there was a Jewish world out there. They thought they separated from the Jewish tribe early on from the collapsing of the first temple, continued their way to Egypt, from Egypt to Kush, and there they built their home there, thinking they are the last descendants of Judaism. They thought they are the last descendants, and their job is to protect Jewish identity, protect the Jewish religion, keep it alive, because if they won't do it, Jewish identity will disappear from the world. And that's the way they live their life. And I will argue even that the reason that my Jewish identity is so important for me, the reason that I'm so outspoken about fighting anti-Semitism, anti-racism, is because the legacy they install in me. I know for decades they weren't able to be Jewish and proud and free, and I'm the first generation that is able to do that. And so it's my responsibility to speak up and to tell my story. When they were living in Ethiopia, it was very hard for them. They were looked at as second-class citizens. They weren't allowed to own a land. They couldn't, they were treated badly. And it was always the sentiment that they're not alone. Even in Ethiopia, when they looked like everyone else, they had the same color of skin, they were still Jewish first. Jewish first before everything else. And that was always a reminder of what is going on. They were always like they were strangers. They weren't a part of the community. And it was always reminded to them. Once they realized they have to find a way back home. And for them, home, what is the home for the Jewish people? Is Jerusalem. This is the place they were praying 3 times a day, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. And as years went by, suddenly they hear about this. They might not be alone. There might be a Jewish community out there. More than that, there might be a Jewish state, a place where all Jews could live free and safe. But it's always was a rumor. When I say rumor, I mean like actual rumor. Like I heard it from my neighbor that heard it from their neighbor. They didn't know, they didn't have any Facebook or WhatsApp or any other cool app that I might don't know about right now. They just heard it from their neighbor. And the rumor was very simple. If they walk from Ethiopia to a neighbor country, Sudan, they will be able to go to this mystery place, to go back to Jerusalem. But imagine for a second, you're a mom, you have your children, you have your husband, and you hear a rumor. If you walk in a desert for a month, you will be able to go back to Jerusalem. How many of you will actually do it? How many will leave everything they know behind based on rumor? I assume most of us wouldn't. Most of us won't take the risk. For my community, the number was over 15,000 people. Over 15,000 people who walked through the desert based on rumor. The journey was hard and brutal. Over 4,000 people have died in this journey. The number says that every family have at least one victim from this journey. And when you ask people, why would they do that? Why would they take the risk of risking their family and themselves? They say, at least if I need to die, I would die in the road to Jerusalem. This is what Jerusalem meant to them. This is what Israel meant. My family was very lucky. The operation I just talked to you about is Operation Moses. We came in Operation Solomon, was 91, and they only had to walk for several days. So my mom, my dad, they walked in the desert for a couple of days. The first day was okay. The second day wasn't okay. You see, my mom was 9 months pregnant. Imagine to yourself, only women can do something like that. Being 9 months pregnant, walking barefoot in the desert. At the second day, her water broke. Second day, her water broke. And then come the world, a baby girl. So they saw, I come from a very religious family. They saw this girl as a sign from God saying, this girl's supposed to be live in Israel. This girl's supposed to have a safe Jewish life. And that's why they decided to call me ASHAGER, going forward from something bad to something good. And this is the story of the Ethiopian community. This is the story of the Jewish people who have overcome so much difficulties and triumph in order to come to where we are today. And I think the leaders of the communities, the people that made us do what we do today, is the women in our life. And I'm so grateful to be able to thank them and this amazing program. So thank you very much, guys, for this time.
Okay, your story gives me chills, ASHAGER. And I didn't know that your name meant going forward. It's so perfect for you. Next, Shiro, wise daughter, is Dr. TARECE Johnson, a leader in Atlanta's local NAACP, Alliance for Black Lives and March on Georgia. She was sworn in as the first female African-American school board member in Gwinnett, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that, but Gwinnett County, Atlanta, in January. Dr. TARECE also created Global Purpose Academy, a preschool and after-school program, and co-founded Multicultural Jewish Alliance. Go, Dr. TARECE.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So to answer the 3 questions, where am I, who am I, and where do I come from, and where am I going? Those are the questions, right? So,
And what do you need to get there?
And what do I need to get there? Where I come from, I don't often share my, my personal story in a way that it is expressive around the trauma I experienced as a child. But Passover for me is one of those opportunities to connect with my ancestors and the experience of their journey from Egypt, and the fight for freedom, and how they were enslaved, and how constantly over time we see history repeating itself over and over and over again. And still to this day, we have people still fighting for freedom. And as a child, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and my journey was one that was one of constant struggle and trauma, from moving to house, from different experiences that I'm not going to go into detail, but just dealing with a lot of trauma. And then when you grow up as a teenager and as a young adult, you're still continuously experiencing these traumas, and you're asking yourself, what is it about me, or what is it about my people, that we're always struggling, we're always dealing with some fight and and seeking some sense of liberation. And now as an adult, with children of my own, I'm still fighting. I'm still fighting for freedom and liberation as an activist in Black Lives Matter movement, as a Black Jewish woman engaged in the community. I'm very active in my synagogue, Temple Sinai, and I love them. They're my family, and this fight continues for ending anti-Semitism, fighting against racism, fighting against the bigotry we saw that contributed to the insurrection on January 6th. And as an elected official now, seeing how the impact of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, how it impacts our daily lives, it actually impacts our safety and the safety of our children, our community. And so, to me, one of the things that I say, where I'm coming from is this environment of societal oppression and racism, anti-Semitism. That's where we come from. And I think it's so important for us to recognize and name what it is. When we name what it is, then we can courageously tackle the issues that we need to tackle to address and change the systems that continue to keep us in bondage. Where am I going? Well, we're in the period of COVID, right? And many of us have been impacted. We've lost family members and friends. I'm advocating for people to get vaccinated. I thank goodness I was just vaccinated yesterday, my first shot, Moderna. And I think it's so important in terms of looking at the present and seeing in the present moment, we are still experiencing the systems of oppression. We're still experiencing COVID and the impacts of COVID, but we also see that there's hope, and the vaccination gives us hope. And seeing people join together as a community is a beautiful thing. But I also say that we must also recognize the inequities associated with the vaccinations. Again, when we name what is, then we can deal with it. So we have serious inequities around Black and brown people getting vaccinated, serious inequities around people who don't speak English getting vaccinated, around elderly people, homeless people, people who are economic disadvantaged, people who don't have literacy and don't have computers. They're not getting this access to the vaccines. And if we name it together as a community, we can work on that. So the other thing I must say is, as an intuitive, empathetic person, I believe that my adverse childhood experiences and my adult experiences and even my current state of continuously fighting for justice, equity, and equality allows me the opportunity to understand people and connect with people. And because I have experiences that allow me to identify with people who may be homeless, with single mothers who are struggling to feed their children, with people who live check to check, people who suffer from different learning abilities, people with, emotional and psychological things they're going through. I can identify with all of those things from either direct connection, my personal experience, family things, but if that allows me to be able to pull from somewhere and to say, I understand you, I know what that feels like, I know what that's like. So empathy, compassion, sympathy allows me to really be a leader in changing the course of, or helping to change the course of our future, and giving our children the opportunity to have equitable experiences. So as a school board member, as a leader in the community, as an activist, as an advocate, as an artist, I am dedicated to using my skills and talents and abilities, my platform, to educate people. As a Jewish person, as a Black woman, I'm very engaged in, again, I said Temple Sinai community. I teach Sunday school. I'm engaged in Noir family. I love my Temple Sinai community, and I can't imagine life without my connection to Jewishness, my connection to living my Jewish values, and I'm a Reformed Jewish person, and I love the freedom that gives me to not be bound to any, rules around. I can love people for who they are, whether they're gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgender, whatever. I can love, my religion and my spirituality and my heart allows me to be able to embrace people of all cultures and backgrounds, and to understand the rich diversity of our Jewish community. And I, the Jewish educator, when you are in my class, trust and believe, you will always get Jewish diversity. So my kids know some kind of way, it could be a topic on, Passover and the harosset, and I'm going to tell you about how harosset is made in Ethiopia or, Mexico or something. I'm always going to some kind of way infuse the diversity of our Jewish community in our lessons. And then the last question is, what provisions do you need? The provisions we need, or I need, as a Black Jewish woman, is really the understanding. I need people to do the interpersonal work to understand the richness of our Jewish community, to study, to understand their own biases and how their biases can impact the belonging or the sense of belonging for Jews of color. And we belong. There should never be an experience where we have all of these Jews from all over the United States collectively saying the same message, where we always have to fight for our belonging. And so that means there's work we have to do as a Jewish community. And I think the hard conversations we have to have and the courageous conversations we have to have for change is the conversations around, there are Jewish people who went to the White House on January 6th and participated in the insurrection. That's a fact. There are Jewish people who actively engage in racism and oppression of Black and brown people, including Black and brown Jews. That's a fact. So what we have to do is speak it, recognize it, and just like we say, the process of teshuvah, right? We have this process of teshuvah where we recognize where we are, and then we, ask for forgiveness, and then we take the actions that we need to take to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes. And I think when we all live our Jewish values within our Jewish community, outside of our Jewish community, we are extraordinary leaders. We're extraordinary human beings. We are humanitarians living our Jewish values, and people will start to see the beauty and the power of who we are as a Jewish community when we truly live our Jewish values. And I think we have to challenge one another and hold one another accountable to that. And Black and brown Jews, we have a challenge to just being and feeling like we belong. And so the challenge and what we need from people is just to do the research, do the interpersonal work. And I'm just going to ask that one thing, because I have a whole list of things that we can do. But in my opinion, the first thing that we all can do as a personal level, without engaging other people, without the training, without the seminars and the workshops, is just do your research. Google how to be an anti-racist. Google what is biases. Google what is anti-racism. Google how to end discrimination. Google it. Do your own research, buy books, read White Fragility, understand white privilege, because understand, even if you're a white passing Jew, understand what that looks like and what that means and feels to you, and how you can start to dismantle system of racism within our Jewish community and outside our Jewish community. How to dismantle systems of homophobia, xenophobia within our community, and look at that, and we can evolve to be a more united community where everyone feels like they belong. And finally, I want to say, I want to share a poem. I'm a poet. I'm a published author. I write a lot of poems, and I want to share this poem called Freedom. And I think it's, this is the message of today, is around freedom. And I'm honored again, and I thank you all for being recognized as one of the 4 daughters and answering these questions and being a part of this program. So I want to close with this poem called Freedom. I learned something about freedom. It is the spiritual experience of being in joy. It is not just about the pursuit of happiness and finding true love, but being in a place of utter comfort because of self-acceptance. It is the relief you feel when you arrive to your warm home from the freezing cold. It is the life breath you take after being underwater. It is the elation of being released from a cage, and freedom is like coasting in the clear blue sky. It is the wind flowing beneath your wings and carrying you to the heavens. Freedom is experiencing God when you realize her beauty. You are truly liberated when you know that you are all you need, and the glory of the universe exists not externally, but it moves within the core of your very being. The power you generate from the awareness of who you are sparks the light from within your spirit, and your energy meanders and it moves in waves rolling like the sea. It meanders through the land like deep rivers and sings songs of deliverance. Judgments and assumptions are impenetrable, and negative words are meaningless. Jealousy, hate, and envy are muted, and nothing and no one can cage the bird that knows her own voice. She sings her songs of emancipation and calls to her ancestors to celebrate who she is and who they are living within her. She is the dream they hoped for. She is the dream they hope to come true. The stars they followed, beaming from the midnight sky, and the God they prayed to. She is the love of their life, and hers too. Thank you.
Thank you, Terese. Dr. Terese, you just took us on a journey of hope. And yeah, learning never ends, growing never ends, personally, politically, everywhere. The fight, the struggle is real, as one of my emojis say, but it's real. And once we join it, we're in it. And when we're in it, we see hope. And thank you, that was beautiful. So now we're gonna hear from a wise son, Rabbi Jonah Pesner. He is on the NAACP board and director of Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. And he will be introducing Hillary O'Shelton, another wise son, from the NAACP. Rabbi Jonah Dov Pesner serves as director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism and is the senior vice president of the Union for Reform Judaism. Named one of the most influential rabbis in America by Newsweek magazine, he is an inspirational leader and tireless advocate who has dedicated his career to challenge Jewish communities to reach across lines of race, class, and faith in campaigns for social justice. Rabbi Jonah, the floor is yours.
Wow, thank you so much, Rachel. What a wonderful introduction, and to be named a wise son by you, given your history, your story, and your work is incredibly meaningful. Thank you, Rachel. And I know everybody on this Zoom joins me in thanking you and thanking Afraim as well and SHIN-DC for the incredible work that you are doing and the stories that you are telling and the leadership that you are lifting up. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the Reformed Jewish Movement, the RAC, and the URJ, the largest and most diverse denomination in Jewish life, and of course, to be a national board member of the NAACP, the nation's largest and oldest civil rights organization, as we recognize 4 incredible wise daughters. What a way to get ready for Pesach and to hear the female voices of freedom. Afraim, thank you for the quote you read from Maud Nathan. I want to add another quote, another female voice of freedom, Emma Lazarus, the great Sephardic Jewish cousin of Maud Nathan and poet. Her poem, The New Colossus, appears, of course, at the Statue of Liberty. And I'll read an excerpt of it now because each and every woman in her struggle for freedom is, quote, a mighty woman with a torch. All of our honorees today are mighty women with torches, lighting a path for us all. It is an honor as a wise son to read this poem of Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, my friend, my co-traveler in the journey for justice, Hillary O. Shelton, the director of the NAACP Washington Bureau and the senior vice president of the NAACP Advocacy and Policy Team. He is responsible for advocating for all the federal public policy issues on the agenda of the NAACP in the United States. Hillary Shelton, it was an honor to carry the Torah scroll with you from Selma to Washington as thousands of Jews showed up as part of the NAACP, America's Journey for Justice. The floor is yours.
Rabbi, I do want to thank you, and I'm just so deeply honored to hear from you and say those wonderful things about me. Someone who I've come to respect and appreciate so much, that is of and from extraordinarily rich traditions. That is, I met Rabbi as he was coming into his new position with the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. But I also knew of the extraordinary background and those that came before him. You see, the other rabbi I often call upon prior to meeting Rabbi Pesner was Rabbi Saperstein, an incredible man that has also joined us in providing incredible leadership, both with the NAACP and in the civil rights community here in Washington, D.C. You see, I come from a fascinating tradition of both of my parents were actually born in Mississippi, short years after, of course, the freedom of African Americans as slaves in this country, but also a state that in some cases was a little disconnected in how it wanted to see its future. So in essence, as you think about the huge numbers of African Americans and other people of color, racial and ethnic minorities and religious minorities as well, you know, the Mississippi hadn't always been the best place to be. It's some place that unfortunately was overwhelmingly influenced by white supremacists and segregationists. But in essence, having gone through that experience, hearing from both of my parents that I actually grew up in the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri, another place that many leaving troubled areas like Mississippi decided to travel to as they sought their future. So I grew up in the Midwest, but even then at a time when as much as the law had changed, the practices had not. But as we think about the brave women that we are celebrating, we are recognizing, that we are commemorating today, we recognize the journey that they've come upon. That is, from whence they've come. If if you think about it, even the changes in the law and the changes in how we as a nation and as communities view what's going on around us, these are women that have risen above those challenges that would say, you can't go that far. They would have risen above those who would push them back and say, you don't belong, and them saying, well, yes, I do. So have those who have risen up and looked at the local law as sometimes something in our federal society that has blocked our way. But quite frankly, those that say that there's a much more clear vision of what this country is supposed to be, there's a much more thorough understanding of the rights and protections I have. It says, since I can read, and my Constitution says that I too have equal protection and equal opportunity under law. Let me shout this out to the rest of the land so they understand that gender and other differences are not the things that can stop us, can slow us down, can have us thinking anything less than that very vision that we have from our faith-based perspectives and our experiences in the past. So with that, we're delighted as we think about what the community does together, also recognizing that value. The value of the women that we celebrate, that value is something that we should all lift up a little higher, walk a little more assured, and work to make sure that every element of our communities, our state, and our country, as a matter of fact, even our world, as I think about those who have led the RAC in years gone by. I think most of you know that our David Saperstein became the first Jewish American to serve as the U.S. ambassador for religious freedom ever in the history of the United States. That says a lot about the tradition that we celebrate today as well, not held back again by those that would lock us in to old realities and old experiences. But with that, I'm excited because as we think about not only what they've done and how they've gotten to this point, and think about where we are now and the transition that we are still underway. We're at a time now where we were fearful and concerned about the leadership of our country, but with hard work and determination, as we continue to push for every American to have the opportunity to share that vision, that perspective by casting the vote of their own free will, we saw change. We saw the largest turnout in the history of the United States of America as we all found our way to the polls, even with all the obstacles that were there, the obstacles in many ways of history and historic experiences, but those obstacles that we would not let stop us. It's in that same tradition, that spirit that we celebrate these people as we think about what it takes to actually bring forward that change and that vision that we believe that all Americans and the rest of the world should have. So with that, let me just stop and say, as we look ahead, we know there's opportunity and there's great possibility. We know as we think about from whence we've come, we're seeing that even as we use the numbers to equate and to actually analyze where we are, that we've come a long way. I think about those who are in our leadership roles, and now because we turned out in record numbers, as we oftentimes do, to make sure that our vote and our voices are heard. And with that, we end up delivering more of our friends to chair committees on Capitol Hill, if I'm thinking about the U.S. House of Representatives and that increased diversity. So I think about the U.S. Senate and the changes that's happened is by a slim margin, but quite frankly, those who carry our agenda forward are very much at the front end. And let me just say thank you. And I look forward to hearing from them, but I look forward to the work that we'll do together as the coalition gathered and those beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us. You know, I am just so moved by all these stories that my brain is kind of firing in all kinds of directions. I wasn't even sure we were going to have time for Q&A, but it looks like we do.
I see one question asking, how would you suggest getting Mizrahi voices and Persian voices raised in the US? Your experience are so different from those of us who claim Eastern European roots. We're all the much better and richer as you raise your voices. I have to tell you, there are very rich communities throughout the US representing Persian, Iranian, Mizrahi communities. Here in Los Angeles, I can tell you that the Iranian American Jewish Federation is an amazing source of not only keeping our community together, supporting those who are needy, supporting those who really need a community behind them, but also advocating on behalf of the community. So I would say reach out to those institutions within your cities. Not every city will have an Iranian American Jewish Federation. I know that Los Angeles and New York do, and they would love to hear from you. I saw the second question also from Tanya asking about stories of Mizrahi women. Again, there's a lot of writers out there, a lot of Iranian Jewish and Mizrahi Jewish writers who've written their autobiographies, who've written about their life stories, especially Iranian women talking about leaving their homeland in Iran because of the revolution, coming to America. It is a very rich space. And if you want to email me, you're welcome to. I can also refer you to amazing women with amazing stories. Rachel, those are the questions I saw that I could respond to.
Brilliant, thank you. Afraim, I think that we are just about out of time, but would you give us some closing words for this amazing event that you created?
On behalf of Sephardic Heritage International, I express gratitude for the NAACP's partnership on today's program, recognizing women whose struggles for social justice and freedom have made a positive impact in our lives, as well as the launch of an initiative aimed at working together on issues that relate to women and our diverse communities. Each SHIN program is something to build on, and there certainly is a lot to build on today. Each of our honorees, our 4 wise daughters, are so inspiring. I thank each of you, and it's a great honor to have you share your experiences with us here today. Dr. SHARON NAZARIAN, Sharon Y. EUBANKS, ASHAGER ARARO, and Dr. TARECE JOHNSON. Thank you so much. As Rabbi Jonah said, each of our honorees today is a mighty woman with a torch. Actually, Emma Lazarus said it first. Each of our honorees today is a mighty woman with a torch, lighting the path for us all to learn more about those issues that we need to work on, how we can begin to address them as allies. And I hope that one day Maud Nathan's 1933 insights about rising group hatred, bigotry, anti-Semitism, racial prejudice, and inequalities would be severely outdated. Our growing Alliance for Justice and Equality is aiming to bring us closer to that ideal, and we would like to hear from each of you about practical ways in which we can move forward. Thanks to each of our partners. And the importance of this kind of alliance was also emphasized by musician and businesswoman Rihanna back in February after accepting the NAACP's 2020 President's Award, saying, "If there's anything I've learned, it's that we can fix the world together." And we can fix the world together. At the end of the Passover Seder, we say, "Next year in Jerusalem," at the conclusion of our pre-Passover celebration of Female Voices of Freedom, in honor of International Women's Day and Women's History Month, we say, "Next year in a world with more love, more equality, more unity, and more understanding of one another." Thank you, keep safe, and stay well.